Let me start with tonight's game. Are you surprised Washington is favored in this game, Todd?
I guess a little bit, just because Stanford has clearly been the team to beat in this league, and they've had the upper hand in this series, over the last several years. But on the other hand, I think Washington poses a real problem for Stanford in what they can do and what the talent they have, and I think the crowd is going to potentially be a real factor in the favor of Washington tonight as well.
What does Christian McCaffrey have to do now to win a Heisman?
Well, I don't know that he can match the kind of numbers that he had last year, so I don't know that it's a matter of numbers. I think that he is showing a little more versatility this year. They're utilizing him more as a wide receiver in some sets, and he has worked to develop that part of his game. I think he's a phenomenal football player. The thing that he has no control over is a lot of the games that he plays, not everybody sees. Now this game tonight is a national stage, and it's the only game out there, and then he'll hopefully have a large audience see him perform tonight. But, he doesn't have as many games, I don't think, as Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson are going to have, like that game on Saturday night at Clemson.
It just feels like he's competing against himself, and if he doesn't have numbers that come close to what he did last year, the only way he's going to win it is somebody gives him a lifetime achievement Heisman.
Well, and I think, if Stanford makes it to the playoffs, I think that would be a huge thing in his benefit, because I think people recognize that he's a great football player, and his numbers are still going to be impressive. I mean, it's still pretty amazing that even though his streak of consecutive games with over 200 yards of all-purpose yards got stopped last week at Arizona, he still has 18 consecutive games over 100 yards, and the total yards is over 4,000 in those games. So, I mean, he continues to produce. I think if Stanford is able to win this game tonight and continue winning and find themselves in position to make the 14 playoff, I think that would go a long, long way for Christian McCaffrey.
Sneaky game with Wisconsin at Michigan. Wisconsin, I don't think many people gave them a chance at Michigan State or even at home against LSU. So handicap this game with Wisconsin and Michigan.
Well, again, I've not seen Wisconsin very much, but obviously I know that Paul Chryst is a good football coach. They lost their defensive coordinator at LSU. They turned around and beat LSU the first game. I think they're a team that they get the most out of their guys, and they play really tough. They play really physical. It's the kind of team that Jim Harbaugh would probably love, So I think it's two teams that are going to play a very similar style in that game. Both want to establish the run. Both want to have some balance in their with their pass game and play great defense. So I think Michigan is probably a little bit better, but I think Wisconsin comes into that game with tremendous confidence, having won two pretty serious games already.
Is Michigan good or just perceived as good because of Jim Harbaugh?
I'm going to go to that game after my game is done. I'm going to stand there and watch that one in person, and I'll have a better idea how to answer that. I think they are good. I think I think last year they overachieved because it was basically the same players that they had before when they weren't that good, and I think he made them good and made them play with a certain mentality and a certain style that made them better than they were. This year I think that they're better because I think they've recruited and they have more talent, but I don't know how good yet. I'm curious to see for myself.
He's Todd Blackledge. He'll have the call tonight. It'll be Stanford and Washington. That'll be at 9 Eastern on ESPN. More important for Louisville and Lamar Jackson or Clemson and Deshaun Watson this game this weekend?
I think it's equally important, Dan. I really do. I think it's a great football game. Lamar Jackson has been off the charts here this first month, but I don't think that he or Louisville has faced a defense the caliber of Clemson yet. And I say that because I think everybody expected Florida State's defense to be outstanding, but then they've got some problems. They turned around and gave up 35 points to South Florida last week. So I think Clemson will be a truer test defensively for Lamar Jackson. And, the other thing that gets lost a little bit in that game, not completely, but, in big games particularly it shows up, as good as Lamar Jackson is, Bobby Petrino is as good of a play caller as there is in college football, I think. I mean, he really has a feel for that and does a great job with that. And, of course, he has a special guy to call plays for. And, you know, Deshaun Watson, it's interesting, too. If you really look closely at his numbers, you know, Clemson is off to just as good of a start offensively as they were through the first 4 games last year. Some of his numbers are a little bit down, but I think offensively that's a team that is getting better and better, and I would expect to see Clemson play their best game of the year Saturday night.
How surprised were you that Les Miles was fired?
What was that?
How surprised were you that Les Miles was fired?
Well, a little bit surprised. You know, on the one hand, not, because they've been kind of after him for a long time, and I was surprised because I think overall he's been really, really good for LSU and really good for those players. The one thing I always noticed about LSU's teams is, you know, those kids loved playing for him. They played really, really hard for him. They were a little bit behind offensively where I think they should have been. They weren't the greatest at clock management at times. I mean, they had their issues, but I think overall he was really good for LSU as a program. And so that part of it was surprising. But, you know, again, the people down there, they have super high expectations. You know, they had Nick Saban there for a period of time. He won a championship. He left. He went to Alabama, and he's established something at Alabama that I think everybody in that league aspires to. And I think it's frustrating. It was frustrating for the people there that they felt like they were so far behind them.
I bring up the fact that what Dan Marino was able to do in the NFL, if you had today's game and Marino was allowed to do what he did with the Dolphins, he's throwing for close to 6,000 yards, I'm going to guess. And you know, maybe that's overestimating, but you came out in that draft, and the style of play in college football at, you know, or high school or college with quarterbacks completely different than it is now. Why was Marino ahead of the curve? And this is 1984, Todd, that he was putting up these kind of numbers that you're seeing all of these quarterbacks put up now.
Well, he had tremendous skill for one thing, you know, and he. Everybody talked about his release and his accuracy and his ability to throw the ball down the field. I mean, he had all of that, and he was you know, a lot of teams are kind of enamored now with more the dual threat kind of quarterback. He was not that, but he had nimble feet in the pocket. He was able to move in the pocket and buy himself time. But, you know, he played in a very passer-friendly offense at Pitt. And you know, went to a team in Miami where they had some good pieces around him with receivers and an offensive line, and he blossomed, you know. He fit it. It fit him, and he fit the system really well at Pitt, and he fit the system really well in Miami, and then the skill on top of that, you know, was how he was able to produce so well.
But is it hyperbole to say he could throw for 6,000 yards today?
He would be right up in there. I mean, he would be throwing as well, if not better than anybody in the league. I mean, that his skill set would have continued to be really, really strong in today's game.
Todd will be calling the game with Joe Tessitore and Holly Rowe. Please tell Holly we said hello. One of our favorites.
I sure will.
Yeah, great woman. Stanford and Washington tonight on the Mothership at 9 Eastern. Todd, good to visit with you. Thanks. Safe travels.
Okay, Dan. Thanks, man.
All right.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.